Would I choose to suffer for the sake of Christ? Am I willing to offer my whole and perfect life? Jesus chose to suffer in my place. His death on the cross purchased me His grace. If He is my example, if I follow His lead, my following of His will is what I'll only need. Jesus asked at Gethsemane, "Father, please take this cup from me, but not my will but yours be done," was His final plea. His faith was perfected in deep obedience. His sacrifice was certain, not left up to chance. He knew the cost to save the lost. He knew the sacrifice, only His blood would suffice. His Father took thousands of years to show a perfect sacrifice was the only way to go. Everything else was a pale substitute. Everything else left us still destitute. A pure and spotless lamb, known as the great I Am, was always the Father's plan. When Jesus knew it, He said, "I can." He was our example to always consider the gravity and weight of this great matter. But it's easy to see suffering for Christ is the lot for many. God said Paul would suffer much for His sake. Paul learned above all in trials to appreciate the grace of God that got him through. The same grace offered to me and you. Hungry and thirsty, poorly clothed, roughly treated, the scum of the world, beatings and prisons, stones thrown upon him, off with his head eventually. To live as Christ, to die as gain, was his winsome claim. In the Old Testament, there's many examples. Joseph was one. His trials were ample. Sold into slavery by his own family, thrown into prison when lies caused him strife. For years he rotted, forgotten alone, but God had a plan. He sits on His throne. Many a prophet was killed. Many had their blood spilled. How could the suffering be God's will? 11 of Jesus' disciples died a martyr's death. They all proclaimed His name until their final breath. Their suffering couldn't make sense of Christ's resurrection, was proved not true. Paul chose to suffer in such a way, people thought he was crazy, yet he was found worthy. The disciples rejoiced that they were worthy to suffer too. Today in America, I fear those kinds of Christians are few. We run from suffering. We choose comfort instead. We want entertainment, circuses and bread, prosperity gospel, health and wealth we seek. Choosing to suffer is like speaking Greek. Even those who are lukewarm question the goodness of God in a storm. From trials and tribulations we run away. For comfort and ease and predictability we choose to stay. We do not count the cost. Few can say they are burdened for the lost. Enough to make a sacrifice, enough to offer up their life. When we could complete Christ's sufferings, extending them to all God intends to save. The blood of the martyrs is seed. The suffering and death of the martyrs we need. When blood is spilled, when Christians are killed, the gospel is spread. We know they aren't dead. This suffering is what God willed. We know that Christ is a greater reward. We take up our Bible, God's Word, our sword. We take joy in our circumstance. We know our sufferings not by chance. God is most glorified when we are most satisfied in Him. When we show that in all the trials we face, we prove that the gospel is what we need to win. The world will think we're crazy when suffering we pursue, but to show our witness, this we help prove, that Jesus is worth every cost, that life is found when you carry your cross. When Jesus said to daily die, He knew this helps the church multiply, so I pray for suffering in my own country. I pray that many Christians here would rejoice to be found worthy. Other countries have found suffering brings its own crown. It may look different, but the cost is the same. to offer life as a sacrifice by showing why Jesus came, his supreme worth in all the earth.